The maps started lying on a Thursday. It wasn't a grand conspiracy, just a hairline tremor in the ink. A route that's been solid for 7 years, suddenly looping like a question mark. In a city where the waking districts are being swallowed by a luminous, impossible fog, Iris knows that a shifting map is more than a mistake. It's a warning that the boundary between logic and madness is finally dissolving. Welcome to Fable's Adventures. I'm your host, and today's narrative, The Architecture of Collapse, is a psychological urban fantasy for our 16-plus audience. It's a story about the cost of seeing the truth in a world that prefers to stay blind, and the hollow resignation of walking into a map that is still being drawn. If you enjoy atmospheric, new weird fiction and the tension of liminal spaces, please subscribe. The fog is seeping under the door. Let's go.
The fog remembers. The map started lying on a Thursday. Iris noticed it first in the margins, a slight tremor in the ink, as though something beneath the paper had shifted during the night. Not a dramatic corruption. Nothing so honest as that. Just a hairline deviation in a route that had remained constant for 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days. The sort of change that would pass unnoticed by anyone who didn't spend their mornings comparing the present against the past, with the obsessive precision of someone cataloging a slow collapse. "It's probably nothing," Thom offered from the corner of the workshop, which was how Thom usually began the process of admitting that things were, in fact, something. He was polishing his boots, an activity he performed when anxious, as though buffing leather could somehow buff away the encroaching chaos of the world. "The fog shifts sometimes. You've said so yourself." "The fog shifts," Iris agreed, leaning closer to the map with a magnifying glass that had belonged to their predecessor, a man named Garrett, who had disappeared into the impossible districts 20 years prior and returned 3 days later, aged and silent, and unwilling to draw anything ever again. Within parameters, predictable parameters, they traced a finger along the silver mark that should have indicated the Westwick passage, a route that threaded beneath the merchants' quarter and emerged near the harbor, except the mark had begun to curl back on itself, looping like a question mark, like something uncertain. "Is not within parameters." Thom stopped polishing. Outside the workshop, the city's perpetual twilight deepened into something heavier. The canals, those patient geometric waterways that formed the skeleton of the waking districts, had begun to emit a faint phosphorescence that Iris had learned to read like a clock. 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30. The luminous fog would be rolling in from the impossible side soon, as it did every evening, creeping across the boundary bridges and pooling in the lower districts like spilled milk before retreating again with the false dawn. Except. "How long has the fog been staying?" Iris asked. Thom's boot-polishing hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "In the waking districts. How long has it been staying?" "It doesn't stay. It comes and goes. I know what it usually does. I'm asking what it's doing now." Thom set down his cloth with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a wild animal. 3 nights. Maybe 4. I thought you knew." Iris didn't know. Or rather, Iris had known in the way one knows peripheral facts, acknowledged but not processed, filed away in that dusty corner of attention where inconvenient truths were stored like broken maps. The luminous fog had always respected the boundary. It pooled in the impossible districts where logic folded in on itself and streets curved through angles that shouldn't exist. But it had never lingered in the waking city where things were meant to be solid. "Show me," Iris said. They climbed to the workshop's upper level, a narrow gallery of shelves that held the oldest maps, charts dating back to the city's founding, when the boundary between waking and impossible had been as clear as a pencil line. The fog was visible from the northern window, creeping across the black stone bridge like something alive and deliberate. It moved in tendrils, almost languid, testing the air as though checking for resistance. Within it, Iris could see footprints, not prints in the traditional sense, more like impressions, places where the fog had been disturbed, scattered, as though something had walked through it and the fog had been too slow to reclaim its shape. The prints ascended the bridge's rail. Then, inexplicably, they continued upward, across the underside of the arch itself. "How long?" Iris whispered. "I don't know. Since last night? Maybe longer. The fog makes it hard to see anything clearly." That was the problem with the luminous fog, Iris had learned. It was beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they're just slightly wrong, a composition that pleased the eye while unsettling the mind, and it obscured. The silver tracings that marked safe passages in the impossible districts became unreliable in its presence, bleeding into the surrounding luminescence until the maps could no longer distinguish between the real routes and the mirages. "We need to go to the boundary," Iris said. "Now? Now." The Westwick passage had indeed begun to collapse, not in the dramatic way Iris might have feared. There was no sudden rupture, no catastrophic folding of space. Instead, it was subtle. The tunnel that should have run straight for 300 meters had begun to curl, its walls pressing inward at angles that made the eye slide away. When Iris placed their palm against the stone, they could feel it, a vibration like something trying to remember how to hold its shape. "It's trying to connect," Iris murmured, more to themselves than to Thom. "Connect to what?" "The other side. The impossible side. The boundaries are porous, always have been, but they're supposed to stay that way, permeable but separate, like a membrane. But this," they gestured vaguely at the walls, "something is pushing from the other side, something that wants the passage to be wider." The fog found them in the lower levels, seeping through the tunnel's mouth like something seeking its own reflection. Iris pulled Thom back, but not before they saw more footprints, these ones moving in straight lines across surfaces that should have been vertical, as though gravity itself was negotiable down here. "Iris." Thom's voice had taken on the particular quality it adopted when he was afraid and trying to hide it. "Someone's been through here." "Recently?" "The prints are fresh. Hours, maybe. And they're—" Thom crouched, examining the marks where they faded into the fog. "They're all going in the same direction, toward the impossible." Iris's fear had a particular architecture. It was not the sharp, immediate panic that seized ordinary people when confronted with danger. Instead, it arrived in layers, first a cold recognition of the problem, then the slow understanding of its scope, then finally, when resistance became futile, a kind of hollow resignation. This was how they'd learned to survive in a city where the solid world constantly pressed against the impossible, by accepting the inevitability of the next crisis before it fully arrived. They drew a new map by candlelight while Thom slept fitfully on the workshop's cot. Not a map of the city as it was, but as it might be becoming, a chart of the collapse, rendered in careful pencil and silver ink. The boundaries marked in red, the fog's advance in blue, the footprints' trajectories in black. When viewed together, they formed a pattern, something moving deliberately through the impossible districts, following routes that only existed on maps, drawn by people who had glimpsed just enough of the impossible to believe in its logic. Someone was using the passages. Someone was using them to move between worlds, and they were good at it. By dawn, Iris had reached a decision that felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. The way maps eventually led somewhere, whether you wanted them to or not. They would have to go deeper, beyond the waking district's comfortable geometry, past the boundary bridges, into the impossible where the silver tracings bloomed and faded, and the fog wrote its own roots in the air. They would have to chase footprints that appeared in impossible places and understand why someone had decided the boundary should fall. Thom was awake when Iris gathered their things. He didn't ask where they were going. He simply stood, collected his own coat, and waited by the door with the patience of someone who had learned that following Iris into the darkness was simply what one did. "You don't have to," Iris said. "I know." The fog was thicker than ever when they reached the boundary. It moved with purpose now, less like weather and more like intention. And within it, fresh footprints led deeper into the impossible, ascending bridges that curved wrong, descending staircases that spiraled into themselves. Iris looked down at their own feet, already fading into the luminescent mist. Then, with a sigh that contained all the resignation of someone walking into a map that was still being drawn, they began to follow. Behind them, the waking city dissolved into fog. Ahead, something that might have been a door, or a passage, or perhaps the end of everything that was supposed to stay separate, waited with patient inevitability. Iris walked toward it anyway, because that was what mapmakers did. They found the way forward, even when there was nowhere safe left to go.
Iris didn't choose to be a hero. They simply chose to be a mapmaker, even when the destination promised to be the end of everything they understood. There's a specific kind of bravery in hollow resignation, the courage to keep walking when you know the ground beneath you is becoming negotiable. I have a question for you. If you noticed the world around you was subtly changing, a street appearing where there was none, or a door moving an inch every night, would you follow the footprints, or would you try to polish the boots of your old life like Thom? Let's talk about the impossible in the comments below. If this story of phosphorescent canals and silver ink stayed with you, please like and subscribe. For those who want to build their own shifting cities, the Fables Adventures app is linked in the description. Thank you for listening. Until next time, watch the margins.